Welcome back to the channel. Now before we get started, let me make one thing clear. This is not a religious channel. Our focus here is on understanding Iraq from an investor's point of view, especially for those of us following the Iraqi dinar and the nation's economic future. However, to truly understand Iraq's value on the world stage, we also need to recognize its spiritual importance. This land holds deep meaning for over 1.5 billion Christians around the world, as many of the Bible's key events took place right here in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. And that's not all. Iraq is also sacred to more than 1.2 billion Muslims, who view it as a vital part of early Islamic history, home to many prophets and holy sites. When you combine that kind of religious, historical, and cultural significance, you begin to see why Iraq's global influence runs far deeper than just oil or currency. Understanding this connection gives us a more complete picture of the country, not only as investors, but as students of history.
Modern-day Iraq, once known as Mesopotamia, is one of the most important places in the Bible. It is called the land between two rivers, referring to the Tigris and Euphrates, and is where many of the early events in the Old Testament took place. The region's cities, Babylon, and Nineveh, appear throughout the Bible, and Iraq is still home to one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. The word Mesopotamia means between the rivers, and in the Bible it's often mentioned as the homeland of early people connected to God's story. In Genesis chapter 24, verse 10, Abraham's servant travels to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. Later, in the book of Acts, chapter 2, verse 9, people from Mesopotamia are listed among those who heard the apostles preach on the day of Pentecost. This shows that from the beginning, the area we now call Iraq played a key role in both the Old and New Testaments. One of the most important cities in ancient Iraq is Ur of the Chaldees, mentioned several times in Genesis, chapter 11, verse 28, chapter 11, verse 31, and chapter 15, verse 7. This is where Abraham, known as the father of faith, was born. God called Abraham to leave Ur and travel to Canaan, a journey that changed history for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Archaeologists have found the remains of ancient Ur near the modern city of Nasiriyah in southern Iraq. Because of Abraham's connection, this area is often called the birthplace of monotheism, the belief in one God. Many Bible scholars believe that the Garden of Eden was located somewhere in southern Iraq. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 through 14, 4 rivers are mentioned: the Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates. Since 2 of these rivers still flow through Iraq, it's easy to understand why many believe the original paradise was located there. While no one knows for sure, the idea that humanity's beginning was in Mesopotamia adds to Iraq's deep biblical importance. Another well-known story connected to Iraq is the Tower of Babel, found in Genesis chapter 11. People settled in the land of Shinar, which means Babylon, and tried to build a tower reaching up to heaven. God stopped their work by confusing their languages, scattering them across the earth. Babylon later became one of the most powerful empires in history and appears often in the Bible. The Babylonian Empire conquered Jerusalem and took the Israelites into captivity. Prophets such as Daniel, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah lived and preached there. Babylon also appears in the book of Revelation as a symbol of pride and corruption that will one day be judged by God. In northern Iraq stood the great city of Nineveh, the capital of ancient Assyria. The prophet Jonah was sent by God to warn the people of Nineveh to turn from their evil ways. They listened and repented, and the city was saved, at least for a time. Later, the prophet Nahum predicted its downfall, which eventually came true. Today, the ruins of Nineveh can still be seen near the modern city of Mosul, and the area continues to be important to Christians because of these biblical events. After Jerusalem fell, many Jews were taken to Babylon in exile. This period became one of the most important times in the Bible. Daniel served in the Babylonian court and stayed faithful to God, even when thrown into the lion's den. Ezekiel, another prophet, preached among the exiles, offering hope that God would restore his people. These stories remind believers that God's plan continues even in times of hardship, and they all took place in what is now Iraq. Christianity reached Mesopotamia only a few decades after the time of Christ. Early tradition says that Thomas the Apostle and his followers brought the faith to the region. Over time, the area became home to one of the world's oldest branches of Christianity, the Church of the East. Many believers spoke Aramaic, the same language Jesus spoke, and they spread the gospel eastward as far as India and China. Cities like Arbela, which is now known as Erbil, became centers of learning and worship. For centuries, Christian monks and scholars in Iraq preserved important texts and translated the Bible into Syriac, a form of Aramaic. Although Iraq has faced wars and persecution, the Christian faith has survived there for nearly 2,000 years. Today, Christians in Iraq belong to several ancient churches, including the Chaldean Catholic Church, the Assyrian Church of the East, and the Syriac Orthodox and Catholic churches. Many live in the Nineveh Plains and Kurdistan region in towns like Alkosh, Ankawa, and Tel Kepe. Even though their numbers have declined due to war and displacement, they remain proud of their faith and heritage. Iraq is filled with sacred Christian sites that go back centuries. The Rabban Hormizd monastery near Alkosh is carved into a mountain and dates back to the 7th century. In Mosul, several old churches still stand, including one dedicated to St. George. The Shrine of Jonah, known locally as Nabi Yunus, marks the traditional burial site of the prophet Jonah. Another shrine in southern Iraq honours the prophet Ezekiel. These sites continue to attract pilgrims and visitors who want to connect with the Bible's history. Iraq's land is sacred to all three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam. But for Christians, it holds a special place in biblical history. It is where humanity may have begun, where Abraham first obeyed God's call, and where prophets preached messages of faith, repentance, and hope. The story of Christianity in Iraq also shows the power of perseverance. Despite wars, persecution, and exile, believers have held on to their faith for generations. When Pope Francis visited Iraq in 2021, he called the land a cradle of faith and urged people to remember its vital role in the history of salvation. From the Garden of Eden to Ur of the Chaldees, from Babylon to Nineveh, Iraq's soil is rich with the stories of faith. It was here that Abraham's journey began, where prophets walked, and where one of the world's oldest Christian communities still prays today. The land of Iraq reminds the world that Christianity's roots stretch deep into the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, the place where human history and God's story first met.